My childhood fairy turned out to be a hot fae. I knew him. I know him anywhere. Even though this was the first time I was seeing him, really seeing him, I knew him. His presence was like a forgotten song, the melody just out of reach until now. I'd spent my whole childhood imagining the fairy who left flowers and fireflies, who hummed to me to sleep on restless nights. And now, he was standing in front of me, and I didn't know what to do. "Don't go too far, Liam," Grandma called from the porch, her voice warm and laughing. Her gardens were my favorite place on the entire planet. Not that I visited much as a 6-year-old. Still, there was something about her place, her gardens, that always pulled me. "I won't," I shouted back, even though I was already knee-deep in the flower beds. I slowed down near the big oak tree in the middle of the garden, my favorite spot. There was something special about that tree. It felt ancient, like it had been watching over the garden forever. I knelt down by the roots, tracing little patterns in the dirt, pretending I was drawing a treasure map. That's when I noticed them, the fireflies. At first, it was just a few, but then more and more started to appear, flickering like tiny stars. I gasped, watching them light up the space around me until the whole garden seemed to glow. I held out my hand, and one of them landed on my finger. "Wow," I whispered, grinning as it blinked softly in my palm. Then I felt it, that strange warmth, like someone was standing just behind me. I whipped around, expecting to see Grandma, but no one was there, just the rustling leaves and the soft glow of the fireflies. "Grandma?" I called, a little unsure now. But she didn't answer. Instead, there was a hum, a soft musical hum coming from nowhere, and everywhere at once. I stood up, spinning around, trying to find the source. Who's there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The air felt different, thicker somehow, like it was holding me in a warm embrace. The hum grew louder, more comforting, like a lullaby. "Hello?" I asked again, this time louder. It felt like whoever, or whatever, was there wasn't trying to scare me. They were watching over me. I could feel it. The fireflies swirled around me, lighting up the garden, and the hum blended with their glow. For a second, I thought I saw something, just a flash, like a figure standing in the shadows of the oak tree. But when I blinked, it was gone. I was, I guess, 8 years old when I started to notice things in Grandma's garden that I hadn't before. The fireflies seemed to dance for me, twinkling like little stars just for my eyes. I'd lie in the grass at night, watching them swirl, and I began to feel that familiar warmth, like someone was smiling at me from the shadows. One day, I found a cluster of flowers I had never seen before. They were bright blue, with soft petals, like little bits of the sky had fallen onto the ground. "Wow, Grandma, look at these!" I yelled, rushing into the house. "They're lovely, dear," she replied, smiling. "You must have a friend in the garden." "A friend?" I furrowed my brow. She nodded knowingly. "Sometimes the garden has a way of surprising us. It's good to befriend it." That night, as I sat on the porch, I felt that warm presence again. "Is that you?" I called out into the dark. "Are you my garden fairy?" The fireflies blinked in response, swirling around me like they understood me. From that night on, I began to leave little offerings, my favorite marbles, shiny rocks, and bits of candy, in a small pile by the oak tree. Each morning, I found little surprises waiting for me, flowers, fruit, and even a feather one time. "Thank you," I'd shout, feeling a flutter in my heart. It was like we were communicating in our own secret language. As the days passed, the garden felt more alive than ever, and I spent hours talking to the air, hoping to catch a glimpse of my mysterious friend. I felt a bond growing, a silent understanding that wrapped around me like a warm hug. By the time I turned 11, my connection with the garden fairy had blossomed into something truly special. Every time I visited Grandma's during vacation, I would race to the garden, eager to see what surprises awaited me. One bright Saturday morning, I decided to explore deeper into the garden than ever before. As I wandered, I found an old hidden path covered in vines. My heart raced with excitement as I pushed through the foliage, curiosity bubbling inside me. To my surprise, I stumbled upon a small, enchanted nook filled with vibrant flowers and soft moss underfoot. It felt magical, like I had discovered a hidden world. Wow, I breathed, taking in the beauty. As I stood there, the familiar warmth washed over me, and I smiled, thinking of my fairy. "I bet you love it here," I said out loud, hoping he would hear me. That evening, I set up a little picnic beneath the oak tree. I laid out some sandwiches and lemonade, inviting my unseen friend to join me. "I wish you could eat with me," I said, looking around. "I made enough for two." The fireflies began to swirl around me, illuminating the evening sky, and suddenly I heard that sweet, soft singing again, echoing through the trees. It felt like he was singing just for me, and I closed my eyes, lost in the moment. As the sun set, I spotted a small, shiny object on the ground next to me, a beautiful, iridescent feather. I picked it up, feeling a surge of joy. "Is this for me?" I laughed, realizing how connected we had become. From then on, I knew we were more than just friends. He was my magical companion, always there, sharing secrets through the flowers and songs. I couldn't wait to see where our friendship would bring next. How long it had been since I stepped through this old door? The familiar smell of lilacs and fresh paint wrapped around me like a warm hug. Grandma's house was just like I remembered, even if she was long gone. No one knew why she left this place to me, but I was glad she did. It was the perfect place for me to find a little inspiration after hitting creative blocks back to back for the past year. I wandered into the garden, my heart swelling as I took in all the colors. The roses were in full bloom, their petals dancing in the breeze, and the sun filtered through the leaves of the big oak tree. I could almost hear Grandma's voice, reminding me to take care of this special place. "There's magic here, Liam. Never forget that," she always used to say. I set up my easel near the flowers, hoping the beauty around me would spark some creativity again. I squeezed the paint tubes, their familiar scent filling the air. But as I stared at the blank canvas, I felt my heart sink. Nothing, just a sea of white staring back at me, mocking me. I dipped my brush into a bright green and dragged it across the canvas, but it felt heavy and lifeless. I sighed and dropped the brush onto the table, frustration bubbling up inside me. How could I have lost my way? With the sun starting to set, I leaned back in my chair, letting the evening light wash over me. It was peaceful here, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had been in Grandma's house for over a week, hoping the change of scenery would help me break through my creative block. Sure, I managed to whip up some great portraits, and they were getting good feedback at work, but something was missing. My paintings felt flat, like they were missing the spark that used to make my work come alive. So once again, I set up my blank canvas, hoping maybe this time I'll fill it with magic I've been hoping to see for so long. But just as I was about to start, a gust of wind swept through, snatching the canvas right off the board. "Hey!" I yelled, watching it flutter away like a lost kite. I sprinted right after it, chasing the poster as it danced through the air, taunting me. As I ran, my mind drifted back to my childhood memories of the garden fairy. The one I convinced myself was just my imagination. I shook my head, pushing the thought aside. "Get a grip, Liam," I muttered. "You're an adult now." I followed the canvas down a winding path, my heart racing as I tried to catch it. It flapped and swirled, leading me deeper into the garden. Finally, I'd spotted it in someone's hand just a few feet away. My breath caught in my throat as I approached, ready to ask for my poster back. It was him. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the face standing before me. He looked like he had stepped right out of a dream. His skin was sun-warmed olive, and his long white hair glowed in the sunlight, and those golden eyes sparkled with mischief and warmth. Met mine, and something clicked inside of me. The world around him seemed to shimmer, the air itself humming with magic like he was part of everything. And then I saw the pointed ears, the sharp cut of his jaw, the way his entire presence felt more like a force of nature than a man. There was no denying it. He wasn't human. He couldn't be. But that's when the weirdest thing happened. I wasn't afraid. It should have been terrifying, standing face to face with something so clearly other. But instead, it felt like I was coming home, like he had always been there, waiting just out of sight, keeping watch. "Nero," I whispered. The name rolled off my tongue, like I'd known it my whole life, though I had no idea where it came from. A small smile touched his lips. "You remember, Liam," he said, softly, his voice rich, warm, and strangely familiar, like the sound of rain on a roof at night. The sound of my name rolling off his tongue sent a shiver down my spine. All I really wanted to say was, "Who are you?" But instead, the words that came out were, "What are you?" He chuckled, the sound light and musical, making my heart flutter. "It's good to see you too, Liam," he replied, his voice smooth as honey. "I've been watching you for a long time now. You were such a curious little boy." I felt my cheeks flush. "You were watching me?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. For how long? He leaned against a tree, a playful glint in his eyes. "Since you were a kid, of course. Don't you remember our time together? Leaving you little gifts, singing you songs at night? I couldn't resist. But then you disappeared for a while, and I thought I'd never see you again." I looked at him, dumbfounded, so he continued with a casual wave of his hand. "But now you're here. I couldn't help but come find you. You're still as enchanting as I remember." I felt my heart race at his words. "Enchanting? Me?" He nodded, grinning. "Absolutely. So tell me, what brings you back here after all those years?" I was taken aback by his charm and the easy flow of our conversation. I felt natural, like we'd known each other forever. But still, the fact that my childhood fairy was real blew my mind. Just trying to figure out my spark again, I guess. "Maybe you just needed to be reminded of the magic," he said, his gaze locking onto mine. "Magic?" I echoed, my heart racing even faster. As the days passed, Nero and I grew closer. our friendship blossoming into something that couldn't be quite put into words yet. He would often share stories about the Fey world and how they lived in harmony with nature, wielding magic to help the plants grow and keep balance in the forest. I found myself hanging onto his every word, completely fascinated. To think there were more like him was just beyond me. In return, I told him about my life as a human, my struggles as a painter, the pressures of work, and the way people often overlook the beauty in the world. He listened with wide, curious eyes, occasionally laughing at my stories, his laughter ringing like the sweetest melody. Those moments felt magical, and I cherished every second we spent together. But every night, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Nero would tell me he had to return to his world. I tried to act casual, but inside, a part of me felt heavy. It wasn't that I wanted him to leave. In fact, I found myself wishing he could stay forever. Tonight, however, was different. The sun dipped below the horizon, and we were still painting, talking like usual. I was anticipating the moment Nero would say that he would return tomorrow, but it never did. And though it made me happy, it scared me so much more. I didn't understand why I felt this way. It was just a friendship, right? But every time he smiled, something inside me stirred, making it hard to breathe. What was happening to me? It was just an ordinary guy, and he was a mesmerizing fae. I felt a rush of emotions I couldn't quite name. Desire, longing, confusion. With every minute that passed with him, my heart pounded louder, and I wondered if I could handle the feelings I was starting to develop, if we could handle what I was starting to feel with him. After all, our friendship was still new, but deep down, I knew what I wanted was so much more than friendship. "Where are you, Nero?" I murmured to myself one day, when Nero was quite late to our arranged meeting time. Just then, I heard a rustle in the bushes, and there he was, stepping out with that familiar grin on his face. "Miss me?" he asked, his golden eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "More than you know," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me, crackling slightly. "I thought you weren't coming tonight." "I almost didn't," he admitted, leaning against the old oak tree, "but I couldn't stay away. I wanted to hear more about your world," his eyes betraying his change of words. I chuckled, shoving my hands in my pockets. Not much to tell, just a lot of painting and trying to figure things out. It can get pretty boring, honestly. "Boring? You create art. That's anything but boring." He stepped closer, his presence intoxicating. "Tell me about your latest painting." I swallowed hard, trying to focus on something other than how close he was. "It's a portrait of a friend. I'm trying to capture their essence, you know? But I just can't seem to get it right." "Why not? You have a gift." He tilted his head, studying me with those piercing eyes. "What's holding you back?" "It's just..." I hesitated, my words tangled in my throat. "It feels like I'm missing something. Maybe I'm just stuck in my head too much." "Maybe I can help you with that." He smiled, and my heart skipped a beat. I chuckled nervously. "Yeah, right. What can a fae do that I can't?" "Plenty. I can show you the beauty of the night, the way the stars dance," he said, stepping even closer. "Or maybe you're just trying to distract me," I teased, trying to mask the tension between us. "Is that so?" He smirked, his gaze locked onto mine. "And if I were, what kind of distraction would you prefer?" I felt heat creeping up my cheeks, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted him to back off or pull me closer. I don't know," I stammered, flustered. "Maybe just talking? I mean, we could just hang out." "Talking sounds great," he said, his voice low and inviting. But I'd rather be doing something a bit more fun. Fun? Like what? I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep the playful vibe going, even though my heart raced at his implication. He took a step closer, a teasing smile on his lips. How about we explore the garden together? I can show you the hidden spots you might have missed as a kid. Alright, let's do that, I said, my heart pounding. Just don't get us lost in the Fey world. Who says getting lost is a bad thing? He replied, winking. It could lead to some pretty amazing adventures. As we walked deeper into the garden, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight might change everything. The air was thick with an eerie silence, as I found myself standing in a foreign land, the vibrant colors of the garden fading into an unsettling gray. Panic clawed in my chest. Where was I? I turned around, hoping to see something familiar, but all I saw were twisted trees with branches like skeletal figures reaching towards the sky. The last thing I remembered was being in Nero's arms last night as we slept together cuddling after our little adventure. Then, how did I end up here, in this godforsaken place, directly from heaven itself? Okay, Liam, think. I muttered to myself. You faced tougher things than this. But deep down, I felt anything but brave. I was alone in a place that looked nothing like the world I knew of. I struggled through the skeleton-like branches and took a few tentative steps, my heart racing with every crunch of the leaves underfoot. I could hear distant sounds, whispers, laughter, maybe even a song, but they felt foreign. Suddenly, I remembered the stories Nero had shared about the Fey world. Maybe that's where I was. If I can just find someone who knows the way, I thought, my mind racing. I spotted a flicker of light in the distance. Please, let this be the way out, I whispered, as I followed the light, trying to keep my hopes up. As I got closer, the light revealed itself to be a group of Fae dancing in a circle. Hey! I shouted, waving my arms. I need help! I'm lost! They paused, their laughter fading as they turned to look at me, eyes wide with curiosity. Who is this human? One of them whispered, their voice melodic yet sharp. I felt a shiver run down my spine, unsure of whether they would help me or send me further into this strange land. Please, I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. I just want to go home. Turned out that they were more scared of me than I was of them. For some reason, as soon as they saw me, their first instinct was to attack. Thankfully, I was able to run away from them, but for how long? I kept running, my breath coming out in ragged gasps as I pushed through the thick, twisted forest. Every step I took felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to pull me down. The air was different here, thicker, sweeter, almost too much to bear. It made my head spin, and I could barely focus. Trees move on their own, their branches swaying and creaking like they were alive, watching me. At one point, vines shot out of the ground, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down. I yanked at them, panic setting in. Get off me! I shouted, tugging at the vines, but they were relentless. My heart pounded as I struggled, my mind racing. How was I supposed to get out of this place alive? Just as I thought I'd never break free, I stumbled into a clearing, and before I could make sense of what was happening, a group of Fae stood before me, watching silently. They were different from Nero, smaller, more delicate in appearance, but their eyes glowed with the same golden hue. One of them stepped forward, a woman with long silver hair and the same sharp pointed ears as Nero. You're not supposed to be here, she said, her voice soft but firm. I didn't mean to, I stammered, still catching my breath. She raised a hand to stop me, her expression softening. Don't be afraid. You're safe now. The fae beside her exchanged glances before she gestured for me to follow. "Come with us," she said, her voice calming. "We'll explain everything." I hesitated for a moment, but something in her eyes, something familiar, made me trust her. I followed them, my heart still racing, but with a strange sense of relief. Whoever they were, I had a feeling they were on my side. The Fae world turned out to be just as small as ours. Apparently, the people, no, the Faes, who had saved me were Nero's family. Nero had been looking for me out there. I was actually kidnapped by the Fae Lord, Dominic, because it was illegal for humans and Faes to be together. Something Nero clearly forgot to mention. "Drink," the woman from earlier said, motioning to a pot of soft liquid towards me. I sat down, still trying to catch my breath and make sense of everything. "You're lucky we found you when we did," she continued. "This land is dangerous for someone like, well, you." "I didn't mean to come here," I admitted, still feeling out of place. "We know," another Fae chimed in, this one with shorter hair and a gentle smile. "Nero wouldn't want you harmed." "Nero?" I asked, surprised. "You know him?" The woman nodded. "He's family." I blinked, stunned. "He's never mentioned it." She smiled softly, sitting down across from me. "There's a lot he probably hasn't told you, especially about our world and why things are the way they are." She paused, her eyes flickering with something that felt like sadness. "You see, it wasn't always this way. Faes and humans, we used to live together. We were close, even fell in love sometimes." I leaned forward, listening closely as she continued. "But that changed when Dominic, the Fae Lord, fell for a human. He loved him deeply, trusted him. But the human he used, Dominic, took advantage of his power and kindness. When Dominic found out, it broke his heart." Her voice grew quieter. "Since then, he's made it illegal for any of us to mix with mortals. He believes it's best. He's trying to protect us." "Protect you?" I repeated, trying to wrap my head around it. "By keeping you all apart?" "Yes," she replied, her expression somber. "He believes humans will only bring pain. It's why he's so harsh. But he doesn't do it out of hatred. He does it out of fear." I sat there, trying to process everything. The Fae world was far more complicated than I ever imagined. And now, I was right in the middle of it. It all happened so fast. One moment I was sitting with Nero's family, feeling somewhat safe for the first time in days. And the next, soldiers burst into the clearing. Their armor glowed in the dim light, and they didn't even give me a chance to explain before dragging me away. I was thrown into a cold stone room, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to figure out what was happening. I could hear voices outside, Nero's voice, pleading, his family too. They were all in danger now because of me. When they finally brought me before Fae Lord Dominic, his eyes were colder than I'd ever imagined. He looked at me like I was nothing more than a problem he had to deal with. "You've caused quite the disturbance," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I swallowed hard. "Please," I began, my voice shaking. "Just leave Nero and his family alone. They didn't do anything wrong. If you want me gone, I'll leave. I'll never come back." Dominic's eyes flickered with something. Maybe surprise? Maybe amusement? But Nero, standing nearby, looked devastated, hurt. "You'd give up on me that easily?" Nero asked, his voice soft but filled with pain. "I'm not giving up," I said, my heart breaking. "I'm trying to protect you." He clenched his fist, clearly torn between understanding my decision and hating it, and in that moment, I felt like I was losing him. even though all I wanted was to keep him safe. It had been years since I saw Nero, or so it felt like. After that day, it was decided that a formal trial would be held for me, and that would decide my fate. Finally, after 3 weeks, I was brought to this huge chamber filled with Fae people all around me. The room was tense, the weight of every word pressing down on me as I stood before Dominic, the Fae Lord. His gaze was sharpening and forgiving. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "You should be put to death for the chaos you've caused in the Fae world," Dominic began, his voice cold and final, like a judge handing down a sentence. Before he could continue, Nero stepped in front of me, cutting him off. "No, you shouldn't be this cruel, Dominic," Nero said firmly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Dominic didn't look like he liked the interruption, but before he could say anything, Nero continued. "You know I could defeat you right now if I wanted, but I don't want to. I don't want to bring chaos to our people. You've kept them safe. I understand that, but I know you've always hated me." Dominic's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent, watching Nero carefully. Nero took a deep breath and continued. "I can solve this for you. Let Liam go. I can't leave him. So I'll leave with him. I'll give up my magic and leave with him forever. You can stay here and rule, keeping everyone safe as you've always wanted." My heart stopped. "What? No, Nero, you can't do that," I said, stepping forward, grabbing his arm. "I won't let you give up everything for me." Nero looked at me, his eyes soft but determined. "I love you, Liam. I can't lose you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'd give up anything for you." I love you too, Nero." My voice came out almost sobbing. "But I won't let you. I can't," I insisted, my voice shaking. "There has to be another way. You can't give up your magic." Before we could agree more, Dominic slammed his fist down on the table, his voice booming through the room. "I don't have time for this stupidity." He stormed toward me, his eyes blazing. "As I was saying, you should be put to death for the chaos you've caused. But..." He paused, his gaze shifting to Nero, then back to me. "I'm willing to let you live and be with Nero under one condition." I blinked, confused but curious. "What condition?" I asked cautiously. Dominic leaned closer, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Help me pursue your brother." The room went silent. I felt like the ground had just dropped from under me. What? "Yes, your brother," Dominic reconfirmed. No, I stammered. "He's too young for you." Dominic waved a hand dismissively. "I am a Fae. We are different from humans. I won't age like your mortals. I'll wait for him to grow, and I'll respect his decision when the time comes." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My head spun as I tried to process it all. "You're serious?" I asked, still in shock. Dominic's expression softened slightly. "I'm sure. Nero must have told you the forbidden story of my past. It's true. But for the years, I've developed a soft spot for your brother. And that day, after seeing how you were willing to sacrifice yourself for Nero and his family, I've started to wonder if not all humans are selfish as I once believed." I looked at Nero, who seemed just as stunned as I was. It was unbelievable, but somehow this was happening. After what felt like an eternity, I nodded slowly. "Fine, we'll figure it out. But my brother will have the final say, and you'll respect it." Dominic nodded, and with that, Nero and I were free. We walked out together, hand in hand, finally able to live our lives in love and magic. I stood back in my grandma's attic, wiping my hands on a rag, staring at the painting I'd finished finally. It was perfect. The colors blend just right, the strokes were smooth, and every detail was exactly how I imagined it. But as I looked closer, something still felt like it was missing. Nero walked up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder, It was beautiful, he whispered, his warm breath sending shivers down my spine. Thanks, I said, with a small smile. But I don't know, it needs something more. He chuckled and raised his hand, his fingers glowing with the soft golden light. With a gentle wave, a spark of magic settled over the canvas. The colors brightened, the scene coming to life in a way I never thought possible. The flowers seemed to sway like an invisible breeze. The sunlight danced in the water. It was like the painting had a pulse, like it was alive. There, Nero said, stepping back. Now it's perfect. I laughed, shaking my head in amusement. You always know how to make things better. He smiled, leaning in closer. Speaking of better, how's the wedding planning coming along? Next month, I said, a grin spreading across my face. It's finally happening. Just a month left? Nero mused, his golden eyes gleaming with excitement. And by the way, I heard your brother is on a date with Dominic, apparently. I snorted. Yeah, who would have thought? We shared a laugh before Nero pulled me close, looking at me like I was his whole world, pressing his soft lips to mine in a deep, passionate kiss. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, and everything was just perfect, magical, and full of love. It's hard to believe, but Nero and I are now married. Every day with him feels like a new adventure. I've been learning so much about the history between humans and fays, things I never imagined, like how our worlds were once connected in ways beyond just magic. It's been eye-opening, but also comforting knowing we're building something new together. Our future feels bright, filled with both love and magic. With Nero by my side, I can't wait to see where life will take us. It's like a dream, one I never want to wake from. The end. Do you believe love can conquer all? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our rainbow force and stay wholesome.